If you're into creepy true stories, unsettling real experiences, and the kind of moments people can't quite explain, you're in the right place. I upload new stories 3, 4, sometimes even 5 times a week. If that sounds like your thing, consider subscribing. And it all starts with that moment. Here's what I remember most clearly about that night. They were gone less than a minute. When my dogs came back from the tree line, everything normal about them was gone. We've done this trip 3 times before. Same general area, different campsite each time. A stretch of national forest in eastern Oregon, far enough from the trailhead that you don't see other people, close enough to a creek that the kids have something to do during the day. My wife, Kara, has a system for camp setup that runs smoother than most military operations. My son Marcus was 11 that year, Ellie was 8. They bickered about tent placement for 20 minutes and then forgot they were bickering, all the normal stuff. The dogs, I have 2 Belgian Malinois, Rook and Sable, were off-leash, the way they always are in remote camp. They work the perimeter, check the tree line, burn some energy. They've been doing this with me for years. Rook was 6 and Sable 4. Both trained protection, both with good nerves. You want to understand what happened that night. You need to understand that these are not anxious animals. They don't spook. I've had Rook calmly walk past a black bear at 30 feet. He looked at it, looked at me, kept walking. They're trained, they're obedient, and they're working dogs. I trust them more than I trust most people. That night started normal. We'd hiked in about 11 miles, set camp near a creek, got a fire going. The kids were tired, my wife was reading, the dogs were circling camp the way they do, then settled near the fire. Everybody calm, air smelled like wet pine and ash. I'd done enough nights in remote wilderness that I have a kind of internal gauge, something in my chest that stays quiet when conditions are right. That night, the gauge was quiet. We were good. So when they bolted, both of them, hard, into the trees northwest of camp, I assumed deer, maybe elk. I called them back. Standard. They came back in, maybe 40 seconds. I've thought about those 40 seconds a lot since then. Rook came in first, fast, and when he hit the edge of the firelight, he stopped and turned around, facing back into the trees, tail low. Not tucked, Malinois don't really do tucked, but low, which on him is the same thing. Sable came in right behind him and pressed against his shoulder, which she has never done in 4 years. They were both panting, but not the way dogs pant after a run. It was shorter, shallower. I walked over to Rook and put my hand on his back. He didn't look at me. He was vibrating slightly under my palm, the way a plucked cable vibrates. "Guys?" Kara said, because she'd noticed. "Yeah," I said. I stood there for a second, looking at the tree line. Dark, wet. The usual wall of black between the firelight and everything else. Nothing visible, nothing audible except the creek and the fire. I told myself, deer spooked them, and the deer spooked them back. Sometimes that happens. I've seen it. I almost believed it. The first 30 minutes after that were just unease. The dogs wouldn't settle. Rook kept pacing a short line on the northwest side of camp. Back and forth, 5 feet each direction, and growling so low you felt it more than heard it. Sable stationed herself near the kids without being asked. That's trained behavior, but I hadn't given the command. She made that call herself. Marcus noticed. "Why is Sable being weird?" "She's fine. She heard something in the woods." "What?" "Probably elk." He looked at me, and then at the dog, and I could tell he wasn't fully buying it. Smart kid. Gets that from his mother. I added wood to the fire, which I wouldn't normally do that late. We were trying to let it burn down for the night, but I wanted more light. I told myself it was for warmth. Kara didn't say anything about it. She knew. Then Rook barked, not the sustained alert bark I was used to. One burst, explosive, directed hard into the northwest tree line. Then silence. Then he went back to pacing. Something had moved out there. I grabbed my flashlight, the big one, not the headlamp, and swept the tree line slowly. 50, 60 feet out. Nothing. The beam does a reasonable job, but Oregon forest at night is just layers of dark, and something can be 15 feet into the trees and completely invisible. I know that. I've hunted this kind of terrain. You look for eye shine, for movement, for shape against shape. I didn't see anything. What I heard, and this took me another minute to even register as wrong, was that the creek noise had changed. Not louder or quieter, just the direction felt different, like the sound was wrapping around from a different angle. I stood there with the flashlight pointed at nothing, trying to work out if I was imagining it. Rook went quiet in a way that was worse than the barking. Here's the thing about a dog that's been trained to protection work. They have a specific body language for locating a threat they can't fully see. Head up, weight forward, completely still. Every sensory system locked on. It's a focused stillness, not a frightened one. Rook was doing something I'd never seen him do before. He was still, but he kept moving his head in short arcs, like he was tracking something circling, not one thing in one place, something moving. I turned the flashlight and swung it slowly along the northwest side of camp, then let it drift further, south, then past south. When I hit roughly the southeast corner of camp, the direction of the creek, Sable made a sound. Not a bark, lower, more internal than that. The sound a dog makes when it's telling you that it is working very hard not to lose its composure. I swung the beam back northwest, then southeast again, and I understood slowly and then all at once that Rook and Sable were not tracking one thing. They were tracking two positions, something northwest and something near the creek, and one of them had moved because 10 minutes earlier, the creek side had been clean. I stood in the middle of camp with a flashlight and the clearest thought I've had in a long time. Something is circling us. I want to be precise about what happened next, because it matters. I did not panic. I want to say that, because people sometimes read fear as panic, and they're not the same thing. What I felt was a physical state change. I can describe it as my chest tightening, heart rate jumping, a kind of sharpening of everything visual, the way bright colors seem brighter for a second. My hands were fine, my thinking was fine, but my body was doing things my body does when it believes the situation is serious, and my body has some experience with serious situations, and is not usually wrong. I put the flashlight down so it lit outward toward the northwest, casting our camp in indirect light, enough to see, not enough to blind me. "Kara," I said, "quiet. Get the kids in the tent." She looked at me. "Not an emergency," I said. "Just do it." She's been camping with me for 13 years. She knew what "not an emergency but do it now" sounds like from me. She had Marcus and Ellie inside the big tent in maybe 90 seconds, without making it a thing, told them it was late. Everyone needed sleep, normal voice the whole time. "She's good, she's really good." I crouched down near Rook and spoke to him very quietly. He's trained for this, for working close with me in a high attention state. He shifted his focus to my face for a second, then back to the northwest. I told him hold, and he locked up. "Good dog." Then I just listened. What I'm about to describe lasted. I checked my watch at the beginning and end. Approximately 4.5 hours. It felt like more. It also somehow felt like less, because fear compresses time in a specific way where individual seconds feel long and whole hours disappear. The pattern was this: periods of movement, circling, the dogs responding, Rook barking hard, Sable holding near the tent, followed by stretches of silence that were worse than the noise because they didn't mean it was gone. They meant it had stopped moving. Whatever was out there, it understood that movement created noise. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you what I observed. At some point around midnight, maybe a little past, both dogs stopped barking at the same moment. Rook broke off mid-bark and went silent. Sable, who had been doing a low, continuous growl for the last 20 minutes, went quiet. That silence was the most frightening thing I have ever experienced in the outdoors. I had my hand on Rook's collar. His heart was hammering. He was staring directly into the northwest tree line, and in the dying firelight I could see his lips were up, full, every tooth showing, but he made no sound. Something was close. I don't know how close. My honest guess, based on the response of the dogs and the sounds I'd heard during the movement phases, is that it was maybe 30 feet from the edge of camp, maybe 20. In that darkness, at that distance, I would not have seen it even with the flashlight unless I pointed it exactly right. I didn't move. I didn't use the flashlight. I held Rook's collar, and I waited. My daughter said something inside the tent, half asleep, just a few words of a dream, and I tensed up so hard my jaw ached. Nothing happened. A minute passed. Maybe 2. Rook's posture shifted, barely, just a slight drop of tension in his shoulders, and I took the first full breath I'd taken since the dogs went quiet. Then it moved again. A shift of sound, back further into the trees, northwest. Rook barked twice, then it was back to the long game. What I'm about to describe lasted, I checked my watch, at the beginning and end, approximately 4.5 hours. It felt like more. It also somehow felt like less, because fear compresses time in a specific way where individual seconds feel long and whole hours disappear. The pattern was this: periods of movement, circling, the dogs responding, Rook barking hard, Sable holding near the tent, followed by stretches of silence that were worse than the noise because they didn't mean it was gone. They meant it had stopped moving. Whatever was out there, it understood that movement created noise. I know how that sounds. I'm telling you what I observed. At some point around midnight, maybe a little past, both dogs stopped barking at the same moment. Rook broke off mid-bark and went silent. Sable, who had been doing a low, continuous growl for the last 20 minutes, went quiet. That silence was the most frightening thing I have ever experienced in the outdoors. I had my hand on Rook's collar. His heart was hammering. He was staring directly into the northwest tree line, and in the dying firelight I could see his lips were up, full, every tooth showing. But he made no sound. Something was close. I don't know how close. My honest guess, based on the response of the dogs and the sounds I'd heard during the movement phases, is that it was maybe 30 feet from the edge of camp, maybe 20. In that darkness, at that distance, I would not have seen it even with the flashlight unless I pointed it exactly right. I didn't move. I didn't use the flashlight. I held Rook's collar and I waited. My daughter said something inside the tent, half asleep, just a few words of a dream, and I tensed up so hard my jaw ached. Nothing happened. A minute passed. Maybe 2. Rook's posture shifted, barely, just a slight drop of tension in his shoulders, and I took the first full breath I'd taken since the dogs went quiet. Then it moved again. A shift of sound, back further into the trees, northwest. Rook barked twice, then it was back to the long game. I thought about leaving. I want to be honest about this. Around 1:30, maybe 2 in the morning, I genuinely ran the calculation. Pack what we absolutely need, wake the kids, move, get to the trail, get out. I know that forest well enough to navigate it with headlamps. We'd done the entry hike in about 4 hours in daylight. In the dark, moving carefully, with 2 tired kids, call it 8 hours, minimum, over rocky, uneven terrain with low visibility. While whatever was outside camp had complete freedom of movement in the dark, and I didn't. I sat with that calculation for a long time. The answer I kept coming back to was that moving put us in the open, in the dark, where the only thing between my family and whatever this was would be me and 2 exhausted dogs, and I'd be trying to manage a panicking 8-year-old and a teenage boy who'd want to be brave in a situation where bravery is the wrong instinct. We stayed. We endured. I kept the fire as alive as I could with what we had. I positioned myself between the tent and the northwest tree line. Rook worked with me. Sable stayed on the tent. We did not sleep. The movement continued in cycles until around 4 a.m. Then it stopped. Not gradually, it stopped. Rook looked at the tree line for a long time after that. Then he walked in a slow half-circle around the northwest edge of camp, nose down, came back to me, and lay down at my feet. First time he'd lain down all night. Dawn in that forest comes gray and gradual. By 5:30, there was enough light to see the trees clearly, and by 6, we had full visibility. I walked the perimeter with Rook. Whatever I thought I might find, tracks, broken brush, some explanation, wasn't there. The ground was wet from the night before, and there were marks that could have been impressions and could have been nothing, and I looked at them for a long time before deciding I genuinely didn't know. Marcus was awake when I got back. He'd heard more than I'd realized. He asked me what it was, and I told him the truth, which is that I didn't know. He sat with that for a minute, and then asked if we were safe now. I told him, yes. I believed it mostly. We broke camp that morning. We'd planned 2 more nights. We packed and left. Nobody fought me on it. Kara made the decision out loud before I did, which I appreciated. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There's always another one coming.